A peaceful walk turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. When I was 15, I had my first girlfriend. We lived in a quiet, upscale neighborhood with peaceful streets. My girlfriend, Casey, lived just 2 blocks away, so I often walked to her house in the evenings. One Thursday night, during a school break, I decided to visit Casey. It was late, but since I didn't have a curfew, I wasn't too concerned. As I walked, I started hearing noises around me, mostly from behind. The first noise I heard sounded like a bush rustling. I glanced back briefly, but kept walking, only quickening my pace a bit. As I reached the next block, I heard another noise, a twig snapping. This time, I stopped and turned around. All I saw was the empty street and the rows of bushes that lined the sidewalk, separating it from people's properties. The bushes formed a wall along the street, but I didn't see anyone or anything that could have caused the noises. I sped up my pace, now almost at Casey's house. Then I heard another sound, light, quick footsteps. I turned around while still walking, but again, I saw no one. Finally, I could see Casey's house. I called her and she answered immediately. I told her how freaked out I was because I kept hearing strange noises. As I walked around the bushes that surrounded her driveway and stepped onto her property, I noticed her looking out her bedroom window upstairs. She waved at me while still on the phone, and I waved back. Then she asked me, "Who's that guy right behind you?" I spun around and saw a fully grown man crouched, walking about 10 feet behind me. I screamed and ran to the door, pounding on it. The man grabbed me and tried to put me in a headlock, but he suddenly let go and ran away. Casey's mom opened the door with a horrified expression and quickly let me in, slamming the door shut. Casey rushed over to me as I struggled to catch my breath, my heart racing. Casey's mom hugged me, asked a few questions, and then called the police to report a dangerous man in the area. She let me stay the night, and the next day, she drove me home. A stormy night turned deadly as danger knocked on our door. It was a dangerously stormy night, and everyone in my family was doing their own thing. I was in my room watching TV. My parents were in the living room watching a comedy show, and my sister was upstairs playing video games. Normally, I loved stormy nights because they made me feel relaxed. But that night, my peace was shattered by a loud, monstrous bang on my window. I jumped up and looked outside, straining to see through the rain pouring down the glass. I could barely make out a figure, but the heavy rain blurred his face. He started pounding on my window, and it sounded like he was screaming for help. I cracked the window open slightly, and he yelled, "Let me in! I'm hurt!" The rain was so loud that I had to shout back, telling him to come around to the front door. Then, I quickly shut my window and ran to the living room to tell my dad. I explained that a man seemed to be in distress and was screaming for help outside. Just then, we heard knocks and shouts for help coming from the front door. My dad was about to open the door, but I stopped him, unsure if it was safe. At that moment, the phone rang, and the caller ID on the TV showed it was our next-door neighbor. My dad hurried to answer it, and when I heard him say, "No way," I knew something was seriously wrong. He hung up the phone and told us to stay away from the door. Without explaining why, he went to the window to peek at the front stoop. That's when he saw the man, crouched down and pounding on the door, holding a large, sharp tool. My dad yelled through the door, warning the man to leave before the cops arrived, and then he called the police. Eventually, the man gave up and disappeared. Later, when my dad was on the phone with our neighbor, he learned that the man had been rummaging through the neighbor's shed and had come out with a large chopping axe. The police found the crazed man wandering the streets, and the incident even made it into the newspaper a few days later. A familiar voice in the darkness led to an unforgettable fear. One night, when I was a young kid, I was in the living room watching my favorite cartoon. The TV was pretty loud, but even over the noise, I thought I heard my mom calling my name from downstairs. I called back, asking what she needed, but she didn't respond, so I figured she hadn't heard me. Then, I heard her call my name again, so I got up and went down to the basement to find her. The basement lights were off, and as I walked halfway down the stairs, I called out for my mom again. Still, no answer. I couldn't figure out where she was calling me from, but I was sure she wasn't in the basement. I decided to go back upstairs, but just before I reached the top step, I heard her voice again, calling my name from the darkness below. I froze and looked down into the pitch-black basement, a chill running down my spine. I bolted back up the stairs, practically in tears, and turned on the lights before cautiously walking halfway back down to peek into the basement. But there was no sign of my mom down there. Suddenly, a wave of terror washed over me. I sprinted upstairs, crying out for my mom. She came rushing down from upstairs, and I told her through tears that something was calling me from the basement, and it sounded just like her. She swore to me that she hadn't been calling me and went down to the basement to check and reassure me. But even though she tried to comfort me, I couldn't shake the fear. I'm sure she didn't believe me. Why would she? I was just a little kid. But even now, I know I heard what I heard.